Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential, and together we can change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Kylon Gienger. And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. Kylon has led multiple businesses in the construction, food service, fitness, real estate, and online educational industries since 2012, with 3 successful exits. On today's podcast, Kylon talk about how he went from business startup and began his journey on buying a business instead. He talks about different strategies on how to get started. Please help me welcome Kylon.
This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
Dropout, got married early, worked in construction. I ended up enlisting in the Navy. Great experience for a newly married couple, but we made it through all right. We're married 11 years now to my wife.
Congrats.
After the Navy, got out, I started a painting company with a really good buddy of mine. That's where we kind of cut our teeth in business and in leadership. We quickly grew that to operations in 6 states. We built 2 other brick and mortar businesses. During the course of building that business, I also had one of my worst entrepreneurial experiences in that painting company. Both our wives helped us build these businesses as well. And then between 2015, 2019, we exited all those. I sold all 3 of them. I did some house flipping. I started a podcast that got pretty successful, and did a kind of a bunch of stuff. I've been all over the place. I've been a youth pastor. I was in a band for years. We toured all up and down the West Coast, recorded a bunch of albums. You name it, I've probably done it, somewhat. This was all in I'm 32 now. This was all in my 20s for that decade. All I did was kind of experiment, pursue natural curiosities. That was, ministry to the military to band to business. And where I landed on was business. I like building businesses. And eventually that morphed into, instead of starting businesses, buying businesses. So I didn't get all dressed up for this interview. As you're looking right now, I've got, this is a plumbing company that I'm working at. I bought it back in May of 2021. And I'm in the office here in the trenches, kind of working on operations. We're working on optimizing and growing the company. And then I'm currently working on another business acquisition. And so at some point I decided, and this was a pivotal moment in my entrepreneurial career, decided instead of starting businesses from scratch, I would buy existing businesses and kind of cut in line and skip a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, building things from scratch, proving the market, making sales, and step right into existing cash flow and a customer base and stuff. But that's my general trajectory, and that's where I'm at now. Right now, what I do is I buy businesses and I help other people buy businesses.
That is pretty interesting, because most of the people who I've interviewed here on the Lead to Greatness podcast has been individuals that's business startup. But you're coming here today with a totally different perspective. I mean, you're talking about buying existing businesses. What inspired you to, build businesses instead of starting one?
Yeah. So the long story short is when I started this podcast, it was the very first person I had on the show, ended up being a mentor of mine. And that's what he did. He bought businesses, particularly online businesses, e-commerce, blogs that were cash flowing, content websites, stuff like that. I remember being so nervous for my first interview. I chugged a glass of wine before the interview, but I spent a good hour talking to this guy and we really hit it off. A couple of years later, somehow that relationship impressed him. He wrote my name down, and a couple of years later, he hit me up and asked what I was doing. Happened to be right in a transition period, and he was still buying businesses, and he asked me to come on board and be the CEO of one of the businesses they just acquired. So I did that, and then throughout the next couple of years, developed a better relationship with him and kind of the top level team, and that morphed into starting a new company called Acquira.com. And so I was part of the founding team of that, and that's what we do, is we help people buy businesses. And so that kind of journey is where I got into this idea of buying businesses instead of starting them. And now I'm off doing it myself, right? I'm building my own kind of personal portfolio, but then through Acquira, we've helped probably 400 folks now in their business buying journey. It's a complex process, but for people who are ambitious, who have some business background, management experience, a financial background, it can be a great way to go. And if you want to own your own business, I'd encourage you take a look at acquisition entrepreneurship and buying one instead of just starting one. And at the end of the day, it's complex, but it's like everybody knows the concept of house flipping. Right? Buying a house, you fix it up and then you sell it for more than you paid for it, or you hold on to it and it cash flows over the years. It's the exact same concept. You're just doing this with businesses. And context for people on why there's opportunity to buy businesses right now. We're seeing, and you can Google this, we're seeing a massive wave of the baby boomer generation retiring. That generation happens to own a very large portion of the small businesses in the US that really make up the backbone of our economy and employ millions of people. Well, as these folks retire, many of their, grandchildren or, nieces or nephews or whatever that don't necessarily want to take over the business, but they want to retire, maybe spend time with grandchildren, something like that. So there's a large supply of these businesses coming up for sale. And I'd say there's still quite low demand in terms of experienced buyers that have the knowledge and capital to be able to buy these businesses. And even then, I always say, like, anybody can buy a business, but once you buy the business, now to operate it, to optimize it, to grow it, that's the real challenge. That's what we're doing, what I'm doing here in this room. And that's where we can help out as well. So
now that is so interesting. I mean, buying a business, and you said that, I was getting ready to, but that's all I can think in my head when you was talking about it. All I can think about is flipping real estate. You have rental properties, and based on the season, depending on what time of the year, I mean, right now, I mean, this is more of a selling and not a buy and hold, because market is so high. So with business, let's talk about that, because I get the concept as far as real estate, but what does this look like when you're dealing with business?
I mean, there's really, I'd say right now, I wouldn't say there's a particular season where it's better or worse to buy a business, right? Even through much of 2020 and COVID, there were a lot of businesses that were still doing really, really well. I mean, for, a couple of months there, just like with everything, we saw a bit of a drop off in business performance across the board, and even businesses coming up for sale. But certain industries have remained unaffected. So I mentioned I bought a plumbing company here. Home services is something we definitely focus on. If you are looking into buying a business, I would encourage looking into home services industries. So these are things like, they're boring businesses, right? It's not very sexy, but things like HVAC companies, plumbing companies, moving companies, landscaping, pest control, roofing companies, right? And the reason is because these are very recession resistant companies, right? Speaking particularly of plumbing, people probably don't think much about the plumbing in their home, but it is probably the most used utility you have. Sinks, faucets, or drains, toilets. You're using it constantly every day. And if one of those things breaks, it's an urgent, active problem you need fixed right away, even during a pandemic, and especially when you're locked in your home. And you're going to spend whatever you have to get it fixed and working again, even if it's your discretionary kind of vacation or, go to the movies, funds, entertainment funds, right? Mm-hmm. So they're great from that standpoint. But there's, manufacturing businesses, there's, real estate management companies, you name it. If you go to websites like bizbuysell.com, which is sort of the Zillow for businesses for sale, you'll see all sorts of kinds of different businesses for sale. And they each have their pros and cons. Me and Acquira were particularly focused on home services. But beyond that, right, there's multiple stages to buying these businesses, and we help with each one of them. And, I could spend an hour talking on each of these stages, but step one, you got to find the business. Where do you find these? Do you find them through brokers? Do you find them off market by just calling business owners, seeing if they don't want to sell? Depending on there's pros and cons to both approaches. And there's a system and kind of an art and a science to both approaches. But once you found the business, now you got to do your diligence. How do you make sure that you're buying something that's not going to tank after you buy it, or that the cash flow they say they're doing is really what they're doing? So that's a whole process. Once you found the business and you think it's healthy enough and you're excited to buy it, how do you actually finance the thing? Few people have a couple $1 million just sitting around in their bank account. How do you get this thing financed? And then there's a whole legal side to that. There's a whole people side to it too. You're dealing with a seller who's built this thing over 30 years, blood, sweat, and tears from nothing. You've got to deal with that. You've got an existing team that you got to step into. You got to build the trust and loyalty there. There's a lot of different, complexities to this. It is very doable. Acquire provides, and what I can help with is here's sort of best practices. Here's a roadmap. Here's vendors, systems, things. This ecosystem sort of streamline the process and create a lot of like time and cost efficiencies, as opposed to you just trying to figure it out on your own, right?
Do you have to be a certain type of person to do something like this, or can anyone do it?
I'm not going to say anybody can do it. First and foremost, you just need to be an ambitious person, driven. You got to want it. It's not. There's a lot of people out there. It's not like the get rich quick thing where you just buy a business that's earning $500,000 per year, and all of a sudden you're just going to be earning $500,000 per year. It's not that simple. So you really got to love the business of business. I love the business of business. I love spreadsheets and financial projections. I love KPIs. I love stepping into a new business and making friends with the existing team and talking to customer service. I love all that stuff, right? So you got to want it. And there's also some hard and soft skills that I think are pretty necessary. Hard skills being, it really helps if you have some previous business experience. Definitely helps if you started your own business and it's been somewhat successful. We have a lot of folks, in fact, the majority of folks we work with come from a more corporate background, and they're kind of successful already in their own right in that climbing that corporate ladder, which means they've got some management experience, maybe some P&L management experience, people management experience. They've got some financial experience. So that certainly helps. Soft skills, you're good with people, essentially. You can kind of walk into a room and how to build trust and loyalty and kind of make friends. So that goes a long ways. Because at the end of the day, all business it's just people, but it really comes down to it's just a collection of people kind of doing a common thing, moving towards a common goal. And that goes a long way.
How do you own a business that you don't know anything about?
That is the question. Just in time learning, man. I can just tell you, look, like I bought this plumbing company, right? I do know some about the trades in general. Like I said, I started a plumbing company. We did some general construction. And of course, throughout the course of that, and I flipped houses before. So, I've talked with plumbers. I understand sort of the basics of, plumbing systems, but I can't go out and actually do any of these jobs or anything like that. So I rely on the existing team, right? There are people here that have been working in this business for years, some for decades, right? They're not going anywhere necessarily when you buy the business. In fact, when you come into the business, you're typically making the business better. We came in and, people didn't have great benefits, right? We give them benefits. So you're kind of raising the quality of life. People stick around and you can still rely on that. I'm not having to go out there and install or fix toilets, right? We have people that exist that will do that. I get to come in and work on the business, and there are certain business principles that apply to pretty much any business across the board. I don't care what industry it is or, what you sell, things like HR, human resources, just people and culture stuff, best, hiring practices, best ways to retain employees, have incentive packages, stuff like that. Sales and marketing, systems, a lot of times those don't kind of change across the board. Just, setting goals for the company, having, certain rhythms with certain parts of the team, organizational chart, everybody in the company having a well-defined role, and then having a company scorecard. What are the key sort of numbers that we track on a weekly, monthly basis across any given company that allow us to have a finger on a pulse on how well it's doing, right? Things like revenue or, gross margin or net profit. So a lot of these principles apply to most businesses. And then when you dig down into it, right, there's some nuance around the particular business you're buying. But again, if this is something you like to do, and if you're driven, it doesn't take long to figure it out. Like, it's been just over 3 months since I stepped into this business, and I can already start to really talk shop with the guys on plumbing stuff. And it's just because I've been living it for 3 months, and I'm literally on YouTube, right, just watching tons of videos on people teaching plumbing, right? Just so I understand it better. And I'm also, I'm part of a small group of 5-6 other plumbing company owners across the US. I found them on Twitter, right? Now I'm in like private chats and stuff. So we're constantly sharing stuff with each other and asking questions. So
Wow.
it's learn and apply, man. That's one of the highest leverage skills somebody could ever learn, is learning how to learn and then learning how to apply those learnings. That's all this is when you really boil it down.
Wow. I read this amazing book called E-Myth, and
Yep.
on the book, the E-Myth, I mean, it's one of the best books I've read, and it's three keys he talk about in the book. He talk about the manager, he talk about the technician, and he talk about the visionary. And you just talked about, learning the technician part. So using this system, are you doing this by yourself, or do you have the right team backing behind you to make this happen, or what's your strategy?
Well, first of all, E-Myth, great book. I'd recommend that. I'd recommend anything by Jim Collins if you're wanting to build these sort of skills that will allow you to step into pretty much any business. Jim Collins, build to last, get the right people on the bus, right people in the right seats. Like, that's a major focus for me right now. The other one that I'd highly, highly recommend is the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
Pause. You are the third person. I just bought this book because of the last podcast I did last week. Someone brought it up the week before. Someone brought it up. This is the third time. I'm like, man, I'm so anxious to read this book now because you are the third person to bring that book up. So, man,
and there's a reason for it. It's relatively simple for what it is, and what it is it's a book about organizing your organization. Basically, if you think of your business as a computer, this is the operating system to install to help it run better. And he calls it the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. And so we run on EOS here, and pretty much any business I buy, or even if you just built a business from scratch, read that book, and you don't have to apply all the principles. I've definitely taken some of his concepts and added my own flair to it, but it's a good basis to go off of. So yeah, definitely glad you got it, man. I'd for sure read it. I think you'd asked about the team, right? As far as the team, like, for all intents and purposes right now, I'm kind of in a general manager role. I spend most of my time working on the business, and all the kind of technicians are the folks that were existing in the business, and they really are on the org chart doing the day-to-day necessities to keep the business going. I'm acquiring more. What scares you the most right now, or what's your biggest challenge right now, or something? And it is I'm post LOI, almost under contract with another HVAC company that is 10x the size of this current one. So it's this big, hairy, audacious thing that I'm constantly questioning. Can I actually handle a business of that size? And if we do actually end up closing on it, I do need to think much more strategically on a higher level, the kind of team I need to have in place at kind of a holding or shared services company level to be able to manage the operations of multiple businesses at a time. So I'm in the trenches kind of thinking about that. There's plenty of great models to follow out there, people I know.
I'm telling you, I have so many questions, but I know we don't have, respect for your time so you can get back at it. And I'm like, where do I start, man? There's just so much. There's so much I want to ask. I want you to just kind of walk through the very beginning of this company that you're thinking about purchasing. I want you to walk us through the very beginning and finding it, the thoughts through it, and even where you at. Okay, should I or should I not? I want you to kind of walk us through that process.
Sure. I mean, that is, multiple days probably worth of, so for example, if you work with me or, my company, Acquira, we've got modules and modules and modules of kind of well-structured training just around this, and, calculators and, models and vendors to help you out. The timeline from, hey, I want to buy a business to actually closing on one, I'd say is, if you're pushing it and working hard, it could be 6 to 9 months. So we're talking quite a long, and I've seen, we've started working with folks and it's a year and a half later before we actually close on their business. again, when it comes to, you want to start like A to Z, and I can just touch on certain things here and there. When it comes to finding the business, one of the first things you want to understand is what we call your investment thesis, or basically what are your acquisition goals? What type of business are you looking for? What are the characteristics you want it to have, the size of it, and also where in, right now we're focused primarily in the US, but where in the US do you want to buy a business, right? Do you want to buy one 30 minutes away from you? Okay, probably doable, but also you might be waiting a long time. Or are you open to buying one in multiple states? Are you open to uprooting your life and moving somewhere, or moving somewhere for the first 6 to 12 months after you buy it to get it on track, and then you hire a general manager that you then can manage from afar, right? All these things you need to be thinking about upfront, because when you do start sourcing and looking for these businesses, you're going to be looking at hundreds, really, and you should be, if you want to find a good one in a decent period of time. But the key to that is you need to be able to filter them well and quickly sort and be like, nope, that one doesn't fit my investment thesis, that one doesn't either, this one does, so I can spend time digging into this. So that's step one. Then it's like, where do you find these businesses? Right now, most businesses come through brokers. Like, there's real estate agents and brokers. You have business brokers, except the business broker world is not at all well established or consolidated, and like real estate is, because business buying has not been really around for as long, or as popular for as long. I think as the decade, the next decade or so, there's going to be a lot of consolidation stuff there. But so there's through brokers, right? But you have to kind of sell yourself to the broker. The broker is getting inundated with buyers that want to buy great businesses. What makes you stand out? Is it your experience? Is it your ability to close fast? Because all they care about at the end of the day is they're getting their commission.
Absolutely.
I don't say that for every broker, but a lot of brokers. So then there's off-market deals, right? You can, if you're not afraid of cold calling, you can call business owners and see if they want to sell. But that's got a whole nother set of, there's a lot of methodology behind that. Not only do you have to get a hold of them in the first place, but how do you talk to somebody about selling their business? How do you educate them on what their business is actually worth? This is something that brokers do really, really well, and it's taken for granted. Most people think their business is worth 10 times their revenue, right? When in reality, it's worth more like 3 times their yearly net profit, right? If it's doing 100K per year in their pocket as the business owner, it's worth 300K. Whole thing there, right? Again, once you find the business, it's diligence time. But where do you start there? There's all sorts of places to look for, the good and the bad in this business. One example is, where does all the revenue come from? And we have a system at Acquira, kind of a flagging system. We have black flags, red flags, yellow flags, and green flags, right? Green flags are A-OK, everything is good in this area of the business, proceed forward. Yellow flags are, it's mostly good, something you might want to watch after you acquire it. Red flags are like, this is an issue, we got to think about mitigating it. And black flags are, this is a deal killer, right? And an example would be revenue concentration, right? If you're buying a business and that business is doing, $1 million a year in revenue, you don't want 500,000 of that coming from a single customer, right? Because if something happens to that customer, your business is cut in half immediately, right? So that would be a deal killer for us. Like, we want those revenue streams to be well diversified. That's something not a lot of people, often think about. There's key man risk, right? Like, this HVAC company that I'm looking at, it does a lot of large commercial new construction HVAC jobs. And there's a considerable amount of key man risk there, because the current owner of the business that's selling to me, he holds all the relationships with a few key general contractors that bring in all this work. And it's like 50% of their business. And these guys do 10 million plus a year. So I need to really understand those relationships. And when that guy leaves, can I take over those relationships and contracts with the general contractors? Because if I can't, that business is dead, and I've got a lot of debt because of how I financed it, and I can't pay those payments, and it's a crap show. So these are all things to consider. That those are 2 things of, could be 50 to 100 different kind of data points you're looking at. So that's just, now we're just to diligence, right? But there's a science to getting the deal closed, financed, legal, and then we've talked a little bit about what you do when you step into it. But retraction, again, I'll point you back to that.
And I want to talk to the audience real quick. So what I want you to do, because right before we get off, I'm going to ask for his contact information to give to you, because obviously this is a lot more information that we can definitely cover in this podcast. Reach out to Colin and what he's doing. Reach out to his team. When he give us the information towards the end, you're going to have information on how to the hold of those modules or whatever you need to do if you're interested in this aspect of business. This is awesome, man. This is great. Let me ask you this. What mental model have you implemented in your life? How they impact you in your business?
There's a lot out there. And I'd like to think of myself as sort of a hunter of mental models, and, keeping the right ones, discarding the wrong ones, or sometimes they serve you for a certain point in time. But there's several, like one, the 80-20 rule, basically, 20% of your input basically determines 80% of output. That's something that I just kind of keep in mind all the time. When you step into one of these businesses, there's constant things pulling at your attention. One of the hardest things is just determining where to best spend your one limited resource, which is your time, to be able to do the right things in the right order at the right time, right? So thinking of 80-20, what's the 20% that actually matters here to get 80% of the results, and let's forget the rest, is something that is kind of constantly up there. Another one that maybe many people haven't heard of is it's called the ETTO principle, the ETTO, and it stands for the efficiency thoroughness trade-off. Basically, the concept is at any given time when you're doing any given task or endeavor, it's basically impossible to be both efficient at it and thorough at it at the same time. It's never possible to maximize your efficiency and thoroughness at the same time. And you'll kind of notice this, right? When you have a given task, it's like you often just have those two choices. You can get it done quickly and fast, but it's not going to be thorough, or you can get it done really, really thorough, but you'll take all day to do it. So understanding that is very helpful for when you're approaching any given, down to just your to-do list for the day. Should you be thorough or should you be efficient? You have to decide which one. And knowing how to correctly choose can make you basically a lot more effective. And so the way to kind of think about it, the way I choose, right, is I typically ask these questions. Is the feedback loop long? So, when I do this thing, is the feedback on whether it was done right or badly, is that like months down the road? Or is it going to be like, in the next 30 seconds? The other question to ask would be, is the cost of failure, if I do this thing and it fails, is that cost very, very high? And if the answer is yes to either of those, you want to be thorough, right? If the answer is no to both of them, you can err on the side of being more efficient, just getting it done and out there. So as an example, I'm doing, we just talked about diligence on businesses, right? Is the feedback loop long? Yes. Like, you can do this diligence, you can buy this business, but you might not find out XYZ is an issue until a year from now. And then you're like, crap. Is the cost of failure really, really high? Yeah, to the tune of millions of dollars potentially. Right. So I want to be very thorough and take my time with diligence, and I will not feel bad for doing that. Versus I'm in this business now, and one of the things I'm doing is writing SOPs, standard operating procedures, for every role in the business, from how we pick up the phones to what we do after we book a job to how the technician shows up and does the work. This stuff, there's a process there. It needs to be identified and kind of written down and documented, because then we can be consistent every time, and it's much easier to hire new people, and it's systems, right? This goes back to the E-Myth. Is the feedback loop long? Well, no. I can basically write an SOP and give it to somebody and find out, within 24 hours if it was done correctly or not. Is the cost of failure high? Kind of depends, but most often not. So I'm going to be thorough. So when it comes to writing an SOP on like a call script for, outbound lead generation or something that we do here, I do it quickly. Like, I don't spend time, and I 80-20 it. So I don't spend more time than I need to. I'm efficient with it, because I know I can go back and kind of edit. So that's one. There's some others, like when it comes to creativity, giving yourself creative constraints is very, very key. Most people think like if you just So for example, if you say, I want to start a business, okay, the world's your oyster. You just said, I want to start a business. That it could be anything in any timeline. You could make any amount of money. People think that's great. Like you can be ultimate creativity. Any option is available, but you basically going to get the equivalent of writer's block, right? It's like, I don't. So give yourself constraints. I am going to start a business that nets me $3,000 per month. Within 3 months of starting it, I'm only going to have a team of 2 other people besides myself, and it's going to take 10 hours per week of my time at that 3-month mark. The product is going to be only blue and red, and I'm only going to sell to people with the last name, Jones. Like, you can get creative with those constraints, but lay all those out. Now I have my creativity is narrowed, but it allows me to be more creative, honestly, and create something faster. So I imagine you probably have a lot of folks that want to start their own business, or if you own your own business already, new endeavors you want to do. We talked about Jim Collins earlier. There's this concept of fire bullets, then cannonballs, or minimum viable product is another one that I think is Peter Thiel that kind of has that concept. But bullets, basically, if you want to start a business or some new endeavor, like bullets are low cost, low risk, low distraction, little experiments that you can do to see if is this thing really worthwhile. And then once you've proved those experiments and you're kind of hitting the mark with your bullets, you're hitting that target, then you can go through with the higher cost, higher risk, higher distraction cannonballs. You can kind of throw the big stuff out and actually make it a thing. So that's key whenever you want to start something new. So those are 4 that immediately popped into my head that have always kind of helped. And I know that was kind of long-winded, but hopefully people find some value there.
It's a load of knowledge bombs. It's good. That is good. That is good. What characteristics, value, and quality do you think every great leader should have?
I think I've seen many great leaders with all sorts of different habits, personality traits. I've seen great leaders that are introverts, extroverts, different character qualities. Mm-hmm. But one of the number one things I think every great leader does have is they're servant leaders, meaning, the core role of a leader is not to be in charge necessarily, but to take care of the people in your charge. Yeah. And that great leadership, it often requires personal sacrifice. When everything goes right, you give all the credit away. When everything goes wrong, you take all the responsibility. And it's also great leaders, they know how to come into a group and create a vision and goals that are exciting and get everybody on board with that. But do it in a way to where they feel it's their vision, not just yours. They've taken ownership of it. And then you're empowering them to kind of make that vision a reality. So, and then, at the end of the day, you're standing back and saying, you're giving them the credit, and you're making the personal sacrifices necessary to sort of empower them. So often people think leadership is this, you're out in front and you got all this glory and fame and stuff. And there's definitely an element to that, I'd say. But what it feels like in the trenches is you're the one kind of sacrificing so that other people can kind of make this thing a reality. And I like to really think of, my wife actually brought this up, a conductor of like an orchestra. There's a great, I think, picture of leadership. Here's somebody that they see the music in front of them, and they see the music that everybody is supposed to play at once. They see the vision and the whole thing together at once. Whereas, and they're leading and conducting all the individual instruments out there that are kind of in their own lane, but together they make up this kind of amazing thing. And then at the end of the concert, what do? That conductor steps aside and, he takes right, but he typically, he'll give credit to the whole orchestra, right? They did all this together. So that analogy, to me, like when I see people like that, that's a great leader. Jim Collins, again, love that guy. Obviously, he's studied some of the most successful CEOs out there. And if you read Good to Great, it's boiled down to basically 2 things that set those people apart. A, they're humble, which is kind of what we've been talking about. And B, they they live for something kind of bigger than themselves, right? And to me, it's that larger vision and all the people working together to achieve that. So anytime I see somebody, whether they're leading something small or large, or even if they're not in the leadership position, they don't have the title, I just look and there's a leader right there. They can be anywhere in all forms, shapes, sizes, you know. So
that's a knowledge bomb for you and your wife, man.
Good deal.
Wow, Kylon, this is so awesome, man. What an amazing podcast. Man, you dropped some knowledge bombs on us, a lot of knowledge for us, to listen to this podcast multiple times to catch a lot of this information that you have shared with us. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so please, you can reach out to me personally through my email. It's KylonGienger@gmail.com. So that's KylonGienger@gmail.com. You can also go to KylonGienger.com, and I've got links to kind of everything I'm doing, including Acquira there. You can find me on LinkedIn through that. If you want to connect directly to Acquira and talk with somebody on our team about business buying, you can go to Acquira.com. That's ACQUIRA.com. Or again, just reach out to me personally via email, and I can put you in touch with the right folks, and they can talk to you tomorrow. We have a very easy way to get started, because you may not know if business buying is right for you. We may not know if you're the best fit for us. So we need to kind of feel each other out first before you pursue something that complex together. So we jump on a couple initial phone calls with folks, and then if they're really interested, we have them join something that we call the Gauntlet, which is think of it as like a test drive business buying. We expose you to an actual business we've bought. We have you do kind of mock diligence on it, and we have kind of weekly calls and stuff where you can ask more questions, and you can basically see if this is for you or not. If it is, you can move forward to our full kind of program and start pursuing a business. And if it's not, it's no money out of your pocket, and you've learned more, and hopefully better off for it, and you can go your own way. So
on behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Absolutely, Cedric. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.